Thanks for coming to this video. I notice most of y'all don't subscribe that come here. I'd appreciate it if you do. For every one subscriber I get in this video, I'm going to give my dog Bernie a belly rub, and I'm sure he's really going to appreciate that. So now let's get to coding. Alright, today we're going to be looking at useEffect. I'm using CodeSandbox.io because sometimes you just don't want to download stuff on your own computer, and for throwaway examples like this, where you're not having ongoing projects, just go here. It's really, really nice, especially if you have working code or you're on your work computer and you kind of want to dabble in something very briefly. As long as your, corporation's firewall allows it. But I digress here. So we're going to look at three things with useEffect. We're going to look at how to run it during the initial load, how to run it every time there's some kind of reloading or any kind of reloading going on, and then how to do it while checking if a particular variable has changed. And then in the next segment of the video, we're going to be looking at how to use it with APIs. So when you call and ask for resources elsewhere, how do we get that and then inject it into our page? So let's get to programming. And so what I'm going to do is set this on up. I'm going to walk through each of the three examples in this section, and I'm going to just kind of set up the entire little mini website project here and discuss it step by step. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in and I'm actually going to refresh this right here. So nothing changed, but let's look at the console. We can see initial render and no more, which is this line right here. And so when you use this pattern here, react.useEffect, you could give it this no argument array right here, and it looks kind of strange. But what this is telling React is, hey, once this whole component loads, and you could use this in another component and bring it into app, right? Components inside of components. Only upon the initial render, I want you to do this. And every time after that, whatever, ignore me. This one right here is going to render every time. So you want to be careful if you're updating, setting, doing anything in here, because this could cause an infinite loop, especially if you're like me and sometimes write your code on the wrong line and think you are giving it this parenthesis right here. You could have a lot of re-renders and it gets kind of hairy. This one right here is dependent upon this count variable right here for our use state. Every time this updates, this count change effect will go off. And so what's cool is you could have all these use effects here, and they're all, the same name convention here, but for React, they're all individual. And so these should all be spaced out to do something specific and unique into and unto itself. That is kind of the beauty and the great thing about this right here. And it's a pattern you should do. You shouldn't throw all your use effects inside, or all the things you need to do upon an initial render, for example, inside of just one use effect. You should logically space them out just like you do with your ordinary methods and functions. So I've add one, and all this is going to do is use our set count up here and increment it by 1. And so we have this initial render and no more. Our renders every time. So obviously this was updated here. And so this updated or went off. And then we have the count changed because, well, this right here was updated upon the initial load. So let's go ahead and click this. And what I suspect we will see is not the initial render and no more. We should see renders every time and count changed fired in just those two use effects right here. And we see, in fact, because I ran the code in advance, that this is true. every time I click to add to count, this useEffect right here, which is looking at count, is updated and it fires. And this one right here, whenever any kind of rendering is going on, this is going to fire every chance it gets to. And so these are the 3 ways that you could use useEffect in your code. Use them wisely, logically break them apart. But in the next section, we're going to be looking at how to use useEffect by calling an external API. Okay, so in this section, we're going to be looking at how to use useEffect with an external API. In this case, we're going to be using the Chuck Norris joke generator. I can't guarantee all the jokes are going to be child-friendly or kid-appropriate. So if you like random dirty jokes appearing on your screen, stick around. If not, otherwise, you've been warned. So let's get to work here. I'm going to set it up, and then I'm going to walk us through it, and we'll wrap it up from there. All right, so what we're seeing here is that already loads a joke in, and that makes sense because this joke counter is looking at this joke counter. So when it's initially set, it says, okay, so this is being set to 0. Let's go ahead and fire off this API so we get an initial value here. And so we see this joke right up here. And so what we're going to do is we're going to click this, and we're going to increase the count by 1. If you want to keep track of all the jokes going through, you can. This is just a way for me to trigger the useEffect. Otherwise, if I set joke counter to joke, and this updates, then this fires, and this updates, and then you get an infinite loop. We'll look at that in a minute. So we can see there's a little bit of lag there. That makes sense because we're going off my network to somewhere else to get this joke. As we click through, we could see that every time this increments, this fires off. And this is just a simple, fetch to go get the content, and then I'm unwrapping it and then pumping it out down here. Now let me show you the example if I actually used joke, and you'll see what I'm talking about. And we see that it's looking here for the update. It's coming down here and firing it off, and it's just bouncing back and forth the entire time. So that's why we have to come in and we have to give it the joke counter in order to stabilize it. Because think of this too, if you're using this in an internal network, at your job, there may be red flags that come up by your security team that says, why are you rapidly firing and making all these calls over the network, especially if you're in production or something like that. Maybe in the dev environment, no one cares at all. But that's why you should be considerate when you have useEffect, because you could get a loop going really, really quickly and maybe not even know it, especially if you're not doing something visually. But this is how you use useEffect. If you like this content, like, share, subscribe, and I appreciate you watching this, and have a good one.